Hey guys, Emily here, and I'm going to go through today's class in this video. So that way, if you miss class or just want to review the material, you can rewatch this video as many times as you'd like. Also, at the bottom, you will see that there is a URL written. You can actually go to that URL and you can take a look at these slides. And I put way more words on these slides than I normally do, so that way you could read them to absorb the material. So you can double check there if you have any questions. You can also, of course, always email me. We're going to continue to talk about this topic of income taxes for the next probably 2 class periods at least. So you'll be getting more information, but this is just a really important foundational groundwork. So let's get started. First, I want to say that income taxes are just one form of taxes here in the US. It is taxes paid based upon how much money you make, your income. And so when you hear people talk about taxes, typically they're complaining about their taxes. They're usually referring to their income taxes. There's lots of other ways like sales tax and excise tax and property tax and gift tax and all of that. Those are all taxes that we talked about last week really briefly. They happen, but income taxes get the most attention because this is the tax you actually have to do an action for. You have to do this every single year. It is not passive. Sales tax, right? You buy gummy bears and a soda, automatically when you go to the cashier at the store, that sales tax is going to be added on without you even thinking about it. You might not even notice it. But here with your income tax, you actually have to do part of the process to make sure that it happens. So it's something that you have to pay attention to, and it's therefore something that people complain about because it's extra work. Um, and it can be a little bit overwhelming and confusing, but don't worry. We're going to go through it today. And when it comes time to pay your taxes, there's lots of ways to get help and information, have questions answered, and supports, and all that kind of stuff. So low stress. Think about this as just like a intro level explanation of some of the main points of taxes. All right, let's get into it. So, some goals for today. I want to recall what type of tax income tax is. I want to consider the challenges that our government faces when collecting income tax. I also want to talk a little bit about the changes to income tax over time based upon our politicians. I also want to talk about how the income tax program can influence human behavior, which is kind of cool. I also want to, sorry, I just keep saying it also, but that's a lot of bullet points. You're going to hear how the system is designed to work over the course of a year and beyond. So even though we think about paying your taxes one day in April, this is something that's happening in the background of your life over and over and over again for as soon as you start making money, essentially, as soon as you start earning income. And then I've got some vocab words that are written at the bottom here: W-4 form, W-2 form, withholdings, taxes due, taxable income, dependents, exemptions, and credits. These are words that we're going to learn over the course of the next couple of classes. I don't want to burden us with writing down the definitions or anything right now. I'm going to use some of these words as I explain things, and I'll try to point out as I start using them. But just listen to them and be watchful for them in the slides, and we'll go deeper into them as we move. So today, just let the words exist. Don't stress yourself out about defining them all. As I use them, you'll get to know what they mean. All right. So, first, I want to review income tax. What do you think? Based upon the definitions we used last week, is it a regressive tax or a progressive tax? Letting you think. Okay, time's up. If you need more time, pause the video. Income tax is a progressive tax. So, just to refresh your memory, progressive taxes are designed to be um, sensitive to each individual's ability to pay their tax or their life situation. Um, Essentially, this means that each person's responsibility is going to reflect their truths about their own financial situation. So, people that have a lot of wealth, have a lot of income that year, lots of money was made that year, they're going to be required to pay a much larger percentage of their money than someone that didn't make a lot of money. Now, on the surface, that can feel really unfair, but the system is designed with the principle in mind that there is a baseline amount of money that people need in order to live. So let's say if we try to take 20% of someone that made $20,000 versus someone that made, $200,000. Sure, they're both paying 20%, but the person that made $200,000 versus $20,000 isn't going to really be they're going to be affected by missing that money and they're not going to like it, of course. But they're going to be able to still have the essentials and the elements of safety and sort of the right. I don't want to say rights, that's kind of a legal term, but they're going to have the ability to still pay for their life. Sure, they may not be able to take extra vacation that they wanted to, or that, and they're not going to like the idea of paying 20%. But if we look at the other person who only made $20,000 that year, and we try to take 20% of their money, that amount of money could jeopardize their ability to buy groceries or pay for their apartment or put gas in their car. So the math may seem fairer on the surface with a regressive tax where everyone is treated and expected to pay the exact same amount or percentage. But progressive taxes are designed so that way it's based upon your ability to pay, not necessarily the math being fair. So it's fair situationally, not fair mathematically. You're welcome to disagree, but I do want you to know that that is how our income tax system is designed, and that's what we're going to be talking about. Okay, so new thought. I've got a sentence on the slide here that says every year the government has to collect taxes from each and every unique person. Okay, if that feels overwhelming, you're right. It is overwhelming. And what I want you to do right now is I want you to think about that. I want you to, instead of thinking about yourself as a citizen, I want to have you imagine that you are the government. If it was your job to collect taxes from every single person, what could go wrong? And I'm being serious about having you brainstorm. I'd like you to grab a piece of paper or open up a Google Doc that you can delete after, or you can put in an email and send it to me if you want. But I'd like you to brainstorm, pause the video, brainstorm some things that could go wrong. Okay. What might be hard about doing this task from the government's point of view? So, brainstorm what could be some potential problems or hurdles that the government may face in trying to collect taxes from every person every single year. What could go wrong? Okay, pause the video, take 2 minutes, brainstorm a couple of things, and I'll see you on the next slide. Okay, for real. Did you brainstorm? Okay, now I believe you. So, in class today, everyone brainstormed independently, and then we put some of our answers up on this slide. So, some of the answers that we came up with today were the following: tax evasion. People are going to potentially purposely try to avoid paying their taxes. That could cause a problem. Maybe some people can't afford to pay their taxes. Well, that could be a problem in a different way. People not handing over the money, okay, making sure that the money actually can get to the government. Sure, that could cause some major problems. How about the idea of the honor system, right? What if people lie on their taxes? Other problems could arise from that. If you wrote down any of these thoughts or your own, that's really great. I'm happy that you're participating. What I'm actually going to do over the next couple of slides is take a look at some of these problems one by one and show you how the income tax system has been designed to try to preemptively fix these problems. So let's do it. Okay, so a potential problem, the very first one that we're going to talk about, is the idea that the government might take too much money from poor people. And I've got a slide here that has Walt Disney's Robin Hood in the corner. If you've seen the movie, maybe it makes sense. The prince here is a spoiled lion, and he's taking all of this tax money from the poor people, and they have no money to live off of. Not the situation that we want to have, of course. And we have a president, not a kingship, but needless to say, it was a great excuse to put a Disney thing up there. What our government does is we use a thing called marginal tax brackets. And these are mathematically designed to gradually increase the percentage of money that a person is required to pay so that wealthy people pay much more than poorer people on purpose. Okay. We'll talk about the marginal tax brackets. We'll look at the math another day in class, nice and slow. So that way you can have a real clear idea of how the concepts work. Um, but right now, I just want you to know that they exist and that the math is designed so that way, as you earn more money over the course of the year, the government is going to start requiring more of your money to be um, paid into taxes. So, not only is that true, but I also want to remind you of the video that we watched last week, okay? That these federal marginal income tax brackets change over time. I've got a graph here from the video from in the PBS video that we watched last week. This is time at the bottom, and then we've got the percentage that people are asked to pay of their income according to the marginal tax bracket. So if we take a look at this, you can see the yellow line talks about the top tax bracket rate, and the blue line talks about the bottom tax bracket rate. So if we think about the tax brackets like stacked on top of each other, okay, the top line talks about what percentage the rich people are required to pay, and the bottom line talks about the what percentage the poor people are required to pay. Now, it's not that cut and dry. The math does get pretty murky. And again, I'll go into that another day. But for right now, as long as you understand that basic idea, this graph can make enough sense. Um, you can look at how much space is in between each of these lines and notice how wide the gap between these can be. And you can also notice just what percentage each of them pay, right? There are some points where the top tax bracket was really, really high. There were also some points where the bottom tax bracket was really, really low. Sometimes they dipped together, sometimes they dipped apart. Regardless, I want you to notice that there's a lot of change that happens over the course of these years. Okay. So walk away from this knowing that the tax bracket income rates change regularly. They will, I'm sure, continue to change regularly. And that means that you should be paying attention to who you vote into office because our politicians are the ones that ultimately decide these things. So find the right people that you agree with their philosophies and their projected actions and vote for them. Okay. So back to our good friends Robinhood. Not only are the marginal tax brackets designed to mathematically make it so that way the government doesn't accidentally take too much money from people, but the government is also wants to be really sensitive to each of our lives. And so they do that by having people tell them what happened in their life. Okay, when you fill out your tax form, that form is actually collecting information about all the decisions that you made over the last 12 months, so that way the government can more sensitively adjust how much tax they're going to ask from you. Okay. What is this information? What are they actually looking for? Well, I've got some bullet points on the bottom here. Okay. When people say they're doing their taxes, it typically means that they're filling out that tax form. Okay. And some of the things that tax form is going to collect is how much money you made over the course of the year, or potentially what money you lost if we're talking about like a loss to a business or a loss to assets. It's going to ask you for any major life changes. This can include things like getting married or buying property or having a child or supporting a family member in a financial way. You may have had some major health costs that happened over the last year. You could have moved as well. All of those things are going to change how much you have to pay in taxes, and especially with moving, sometimes what states you have to pay taxes to. So, all that information has to get collected in this tax form too. At the bottom, they're also going to ask for some decisions that you may have made over the last 12 months that this government really wants to encourage us to do. Things like buying electric cars or installing green energy resources on your property. You could get a tax credit for that, which basically means that they're going to give you a little bit of like financial incentive through the tax program for doing these things. So the government wants us to have electric cars. They want us to install green energy sources on our rooftops and in our backyards if we have wind potential, whatever. They want us to do that. And so they're going to incentivize us to do that behavior by doing things like tax credits. Also, donating to charity is another way where you can reduce how much money you have to pay in taxes by doing a behavior throughout the year. That's a really kind of cool, popular way to do it because it allows you to specifically give your money to a particular like cause that you find most relevant and most important. Otherwise, you're giving your money to the government, and the government is going to, disperse it as they see fit. So it gives you a little bit more power. You can't do that with all of the tax dollars that you have to pay, but donating to charity does allow you to kind of offset a little bit and be also a great community member. So those are some of the ways that the government can affect and encourage human behavior here in our country and in our individual states. But the end of the day, the big thing that I want you to walk away from this slide knowing is that we've got mathematical ways that we try to prevent poor people from having to pay too much money with the marginal tax brackets. And we also have sort of systematic ways by having people fill out these really long and in-depth tax forms. We're able to have the government be sensitive to these decisions and circumstances of our lives so that we have to pay the right amount of taxes and not too much. Okay, on to the next problem. We solved that one. Oh, sorry, I forgot this cute slide. One of the things that's true about having the government have these really long forms for us is that it can be really, really complicated. In fact, the US tax code is probably the most complicated of all the tax codes in maybe the world. So, kind of overwhelming, but fear not. I know I've said this before in class, but I'm going to continue to say it because I think it's really important and comforting. Okay. You don't need to understand 100% of how the tax code works to pay your taxes. Okay. I'm going to use my metaphor, right? I don't know how my car works, but I drive it every day and I drive it really well. Okay. So you can do your taxes and you can do them really well without knowing all of the details of how it works behind the scenes. Okay. Same stuff. The more you know, right, the better you're going to be. And you're welcome to continue to research this and learn as you go. Every year you're going to be paying it. So every year you're going to learn new stuff. That's totally normal and just organic. You don't have to try. You're just going to learn things. Um, but you don't have to freak out and memorize all of these things in order to pay your taxes. You're going to be able to do it, and there's plenty of resources available when the time comes. Not only will your family help you, but you can go to Reddit and you can go to free online tax preparers. You can hire a tax accountant. You can go to systems like H&R Block. You can download software like TurboTax and things that help you kind of do these forms for you. Lots and lots of ways to do it. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, don't. It's okay. You don't need to understand everything and you're still going to be fine. Okay, now on to the next problem. So, another potential problem with being the government and collecting tax money from folks is that people may lie and say that they don't have as much money as they actually have in order to try to pay less. Okay, imagine the government during tax time comes to me and says, "Hey, Emily, how much did you make last year?" And I'm like, "Oh, I don't know, like maybe $10. Sorry. Just really broke this year. Yep, that's it. So any other questions, government?" Yeah, no. That's not going to work, right? I can't just lie like that. If I could, then everybody would lie like that and the government wouldn't have any money because no one would be reporting their actual income and then the government couldn't actually collect taxes on it. So, the system has been designed so that way people can't lie. Okay. When you work a job, your employer is responsible to tell the government who you are and how much they're paying you every single time you get paid. Okay. That's right. If you've had a job and you've gotten paychecks in the past, the government knows about it. And you may have heard the phrase getting paid, quote unquote, under the table. Okay. What that actually means is it's an expression that refers to an illegal job. And that's illegal because your employer is not telling the government that they're paying you for this job that you're doing. So the phrase under the table, which most people have heard at some point is referring to the actual practice of being out in public. Let's say at a restaurant, you can take a look at this little picture, right? These two people are talking, they're having, conversation. Potentially everyone in the restaurant can hear them. They're out in public, yada, yada, yada. But what people at the restaurant can't see is that something shady is going on underneath the table, right? So here, the people are talking, maybe wink, wink, nudge, nudge, handing some cash beneath the table so that way it's covered, it's obscured by the table. It's secret. So this concept of money being exchanged in secret behind closed doors under the table, right? These phrases, these idioms that exist, that's what it's referring to. It basically means that you are having a job and the government doesn't know about it. And because the government doesn't know about it, they can't charge you taxes. So that's why it's illegal. You can get in trouble for doing that. Your employer can get in major trouble for doing that. And the rules are in place so that way the government is able to collect all of their money. It also makes sense to not work under the table because it allows you to have rights as a worker and make sure that your employer is treating you fairly. So that's part of why that system is in play. And now you know a little bit about that phrase. Okay. Another potential problem that could happen if we were the government and in charge of collecting all the income, people not having money when it's time to pay. Oh, right. Yeah. Sorry, government. I know it's April and like it's supposed to be tax time, but there was a shoe sale at the mall and I spent all my money. So can I get you next year? Yeah, no, not going to work, right? That's going to be a terrible system. And we all know from taking my budgeting unit that people have a hard time saving money. So if it was up to just us as individuals to responsibly put aside some percentage of our money every single paycheck so that way we have enough money for income taxes, well, first of all, some people may not be able to because they don't make enough money to actually have anything to save. There's plenty of Americans that have zero money in savings. But beyond that, s- a lot of people don't have that skill set. And so if the government left that unchecked, the government would be significantly having a difficult time around tax time season because not no one, but a lot of people wouldn't have the money to pay. So instead, they designed this system. When you get your first job, you fill out a form called a W-4 form. It's a very, very, very boring form. It's very short, it's very boring, it's very bland. If you've gotten paychecks in the past, you've filled out a W-4 form and then forgotten about it because it's so boring. It's okay. But what this form is designed to do is it's going to indicate loosely to the government some very basic information about your life. Basically, it's asking how many dependents you have or if you are a dependent. So that's a fancy government word that basically means just what it sounds. Who depends on you or who do you depend on for financial assistance, right? Do your parents pay for your life or your family pay for your life? If so, you're their dependent. Do you have people that your money has to go to, clothe, feed, keep warm, shelter, right? If you have children, right, they depend on you. So you have dependents. So this W-4 form loosely asks that question. Essentially, this paycheck, this money that we're talking about in this job, who is it going to pay for? How many people is it going to really need to provide for? This estimate helps the government just kind of get a feel of how much you may need to pay at the end of the year. So you fill out the form, and there's ways to fill it out that kind of help you in one way or another. But this gives a general idea of how much money the government is going to need at the end of the year. So they take that information and automatically, every single time you get paid, the government is going to help you save for your taxes using a system called withholdings. So when we say withholding, it means that we're talking about actually your own money that the government has taken from every single one of your paychecks before you even get the paychecks from your employer. The government takes your money, tracks your money, keeps it safe for you in you know, their money piles, and they're going to set it aside so that way when tax time comes, you already have a lot of your money automatically saved up and in their possession. They don't have to fight you for it. They already are in possession of it. And the idea, the system, is so that way they can make sure that they've got that money in their possession already and they don't need to go door to door and knock and ask you to fill out checks or whatever, right? Much simpler to do it this way. They take it directly from your job before you can even touch it, and they put it aside for you. Here's an example from your life that may make sense. Okay. Imagine it's your birthday. Happy birthday. Hey, you just got a bunch of envelopes in the mail because it's COVID and no one can come to your birthday party. Sorry. But hey, that's really great because you got a bunch of envelopes and they look like nice, fat, thick envelopes from grandma and your aunt and your uncle and your cousin. Oh my gosh, you have a rich cousin. They sent you an envelope. Great. So you open up all the envelopes, there's beautiful sentiments in all the cards, lovely, wonderful, but you shake them all out and you get a big stack of money, right? And let's say you count the money and you have $500. Oh, goodness, right? That is a lot of cash. And if you hold on to that cash, you're probably going to blow it all. So your parents know you, love you, take the money and say, okay, great. Yeah, no, you can't have access to all of this. We're going to keep some of it aside for you for college or for a big thing that you're saving up for, or for upcoming vacation, or for that video game you really want. And then they give you some of it. Okay. That probably doesn't feel fair, but your parents aren't taking that money and keeping it for themselves. They're taking it and putting it aside for something that you need to pay for in the future that they know you won't save up for. The government's doing the same thing. Every time you get a paycheck, they're taking a percentage of that paycheck automatically without you even touching it first, and they're holding it to the side and they're saying, "This is still your money. We're just holding on to it for you because we know you're going to need it later." Okay? So that's what withholdings are. And that's why, if you've ever thought about it or done the math, if you've worked a part time job that you get hourly pay for, you're usually expecting your paycheck to be a lot higher than it is. It's because of taxes being removed. Okay. That money is still your money. It's just with the government until tax time. And then you might get some of it back. Okay. So if you're not already angry about this system, I do want to, calm you down a little bit and tell you that if the government accidentally takes too much of your money from this system, right? Let's say that they take $3,000 from you over the course of the entire year. Okay. And then at the end of the year, you do your taxes and it turns out, you paid 300 in withholding, you only have to pay two. Well, that means you've got an extra $1,000. That money goes back to you. Okay. They've taken too much money, you get a tax refund. Okay. However, same situation, but opposite. Let's say that they only kept 2,000 of your dollars, and when you do your taxes, you actually owe three. Well, that means that you don't have enough to cover, and this $1,000 you have to pay now. So do rest assured that it does even out in the end. But the system is designed so that way you don't have to save your money on your own. The government is saving it on your behalf. Okay. So, congratulations. You've gotten through a lot of information about taxes. You probably know more information about taxes than 80% of my adult friends. Super proud of you. What I want to do is I just want to fit it all together in one big, nice slide that really looks at it across a timeline. Okay. So, I like to break the timeline into three different parts. Okay. What happens throughout the year, what happens at the end of the year, and what happens before the tax deadline. Okay. So those are three kind of unique elements to the timeline. Okay. So first, let's talk about what happens throughout the year. And again, this is pretty much all a review, but it's great to see it this way. We're going to talk about 2020 taxes. Okay. So that means starting the very first moment of January 2020 all the way to the very last moment of December 2020, the entire 12 months, the calendar year. Okay. All throughout the year, the government is taking parts of your paychecks as withholding and they're setting it aside. It's still your money. They're just withholding it. They're holding on to it for you. Okay. It's going to be used to pay your taxes at the start of the next year. So that happens throughout the entire year. You get a paycheck, some of it goes to the government as withholdings, you get the rest of the paycheck. You get another paycheck, some of the money goes to the government as withholdings, you get the paycheck. over and over and over again until at the end of the year, there's a big, nice stack of your withholdings that the government is holding. Okay. And then January 2021 rolls around. Happy New Year! All acquaintance we forgot. Okay, great. So the whole year has ended. 2020, done, right? It is now 2021. Okay. And because the entire year has ended, the government can now officially say how much money you have made. And that means they can officially say how much money they've kept of yours. Okay. You can't do that until the year ends. Think about your grades. Okay. You don't get your semester one grades during semester one because semester one is still happening, right? You have to wait for semester one to completely end and then a little bit of lag time for me and the rest of your teachers to get all your grades together and calculate everything, right? And then finally you get your information sometime in the beginning of semester two. There is just this lag time that has to happen. We can't grade you until the first semester is completed. So we have to wait for that to end and then take a little bit of time to summarize it all up and get that information to you. Um, Same thing with your taxes. Okay. We're talking about, from the beginning of January to the very end of December. That's an entire calendar year. The year has to end before the government can give you your information. They give it to you in the form of a receipt, I like to say. It's called a W 2 form normally. Most people get W 2 forms. You get one for every job that you have, or most jobs that you have. And it's an official form that says exactly how much money you made at each of your jobs throughout the entire calendar year, and also how much of your money the government has kept in withholdings throughout the entire calendar year. So, two very important big numbers that you can only get once the year has completed, and it comes directly from the federal government. So that way it's really official. You don't have to keep track of it, it automatically gets counted for you from the federal government and your employer. Okay, so now you've got the year ended, you've got these tax forms that came in the mail that are summarizing what happened. Now you actually have to do what's called filing your taxes. Okay, so April 15th is the tax deadline. If April 15th happens to fall on a weekend, they push it a couple of days after, so that way it is a weekday. But here's the jam. You have to fill out your tax form before that deadline that year. And when I say fill out your tax form, I want you to think about basically kind of doing like a math worksheet. It's a really, really boring math worksheet, but essentially you answer this whole series of questionnaire questions and you just follow the rules one after another, right? These questions are designed to get all that information from you about what happened in your life. The government knows how much money you made, but they aren't going to know if you got married or had a kid or bought a home or had medical bills necessarily. So you need to tell them all that information, and you do that through filling out the tax form. Um, these forms, they're going to ask you all about what's happened from that beginning of January to the end of December. Um, and once you finish filling out the form, you will know how much you actually owe in taxes. Okay. It's your taxes owed. It's like a single number. End of the day, this is how much I owe the federal government. Okay. And that is sort of the goal of all of this work is just calculating uniquely for yourself how much money the government is requiring you to pay. So once that number, you arrive at that number by doing all this math on this worksheet, okay, you're going to compare it to how much money the federal government has already kept of yours in that withholding. So how much money do you owe? How much of your money are they holding? And you compare those two. We talked about this a couple slides ago. This is where those numbers, we've tried to figure out which one's bigger. And here's the situation, right? If the government took too much in withholdings, so they are holding on to more than they are rightly allowed to keep, you get some of that money back. Yay, that's a tax refund. Okay. However, if the amount of money that you owe the government is too much, it's more than what they kept of yours, well, the government's going to want some of that extra money back. Okay. You have to pay the difference. So the ideal situation is that these two numbers equal the same, which means that they've kept exactly how much money as you owe them. That hardly ever happens. It's really very calculated and very specific. So the likelihood of that happening is pretty low. If it does, that's super cool. I'll buy you a milkshake. But um, really, realistically, you're going to either have to pay the government a little bit of money or they're going to be giving you some back. Okay. So, all that being said, I want to congratulate you for hanging with me for this really long video. Hopefully, you learned some stuff. We're going to continue to talk about it in class. So, if you are confused, don't worry about it. You've done a great job giving yourself some baseline knowledge, and we will go nice and slow as we continue to talk about it in class. But that's really all for today. So feel free to check Blackbaud for a quick homework assignment. Make sure that you don't have anything assigned. Make sure that you don't have anything to finish up. And other than that, I will see you in class soon. Thank you all so much for hanging with me. Bye, everybody.